What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catchpolia sitting on the couch, making some money, investing in fractional real estate online, as usual. Today was the monthly Mogul webinar. Every time I listen to those guys talk about real estate, I think even more highly of them. I think that they had a lot of questions today on that webinar, and didn't have any answers that I was like that I disagreed with in any strong manner. I think every once in a while we'll have some slightly different thoughts about some things, but I like them a lot. I think it's going to turn out horribly for me if if Mogul ends up not being a great platform because more and more I find it hard to find things to be critical about. Um, that being said, they have a new property they launched during the webinar today. There's quite a bit to like about it. I'm going to go through that just like I always do with our due diligence videos. As a reminder, just because I do or don't buy one of these properties doesn't mean that you should. You want to do your own due diligence. I'm just, sharing my thoughts on what I'm looking at and what I like and don't like, but your risk preferences are going to be different. Your timeline, your goals, all that stuff is going to be different, and so you want to dig into it on your own. Um, Also, in the description to this video, there's a link to a Discord where a whole bunch of us investors get together and talk pretty regularly about a lot of different fractional real estate platforms. There's also in this video, the description links to all the places where I'm currently invested. If you're not on Mogul yet, there's a link to a referral link that gets you like $50 on your first investment if it's still working. Theirs has been, some of the other sites have not. There's also a club to join where you get some additional cash back and really no downside for joining that club. I mean, all it does is um, you'll get some additional alerts when other people sign up. So that's about it. So if you are investing on this platform and you haven't joined a club yet, obviously look into it for yourself, but it seems like there's no downside. I would just pick one that's giving you the full 2% rebate. I noticed there's one that looks like it's saying 0.02%, and I think they're trying to be tricky there. But that's it. I think that's uh, essentially, if you're going to invest on there already, it seems to be it's basically free money, right? They're just trying to encourage more people to get involved, talk about it, invite other people, and that's the goal there. So, anyway, what's the property? It is another pad split, 7 bedrooms, 3 baths, 2,624 square feet, which by pad split standards, this is a pretty big home for 7 bedrooms. And this is one of the first times, let's see, did they put it on this page? They put it on the analysis tab. Uh-oh, pulling stuff out. All right. This is one of the first times where they've talked about having the potential to expand for additional rentals, for additional bedrooms. It doesn't seem like they've are modeling that because they're basing the revenue off of at least they're basing the year one revenue off of their actuals because this is another operating pad split. And I didn't notice a year where there was a big enough pop to make me think that they're actually modeling adding the extra bedrooms. So it'll be interesting to see if that's something that they decide to do or not. I think that's this is already a fantastic deal as far as I'm concerned. As far as numbers go, we all of course want to look into all the risks and whatnot. But as far as like their stated returns, they look really good, and that's based on the in place income with 7 bedrooms, right? So it will be really interesting to see if going forward they try to juice those a little by adding additional bedrooms. Now, it is I think a Victorian style house. It's a pretty big older home. I mean, I think they said that, but I don't. Yeah, I guess I would call it that. Not a huge architecture guy, despite having been in real estate as long as I am, right? I'm much more numbers nerd than anything else, numbers and markets and risks. But I actually know somebody who does a lot of work with architecture and returns, and it's sort of a something that I need to get into at some point. But anyway, weird aside, I know you're used to those from me if you watch a lot of these videos. So what do we have here? I want to show you no, I'm on the wrong tab. That's why. I really, I like their user interface a whole lot. It's really easy to go through buy properties and get sort of your overview here, and then your second tab is the analysis tab. Now, because I am someone who is 100% of the time going to look at the analysis tab, I'd almost want to like them to just be, put together. One of the things is modeling a refinance, so I always like to shut that off and then see like how much is it affecting the return. Okay, it's it's still not affecting it very much. It's 14.1, and I think we were at 15, what, 15, what, 15.2, right? So makes a little bit of a difference. I don't mind that they model them. I think that I don't really think they have to. I think they're always just trying to get to a certain number. I think they're usually being pretty conservative, but have a number they want to hit, right? And so, like for example, when they're looking at their projections for year one, they're being more conservative than just taking last year's. But then they go and they model a refinance where it's not always guaranteed you're going to be able to refinance. Now, I think it's a pretty safe bet that sometime in the next 5 years that's going to be the case, that you're going to be able to do that. But at the same time, I just don't think you need to do it. So I don't know. So I always think it's a little bit funny that they do it, especially because it just goes from 14 to 15. If this refi was creating a huge portion of the IRR, it would worry me quite a bit. But the way they do it I haven't seen one where they've done that yet. But it's something I always want to uncheck that box and see what the difference is, right? I think it's important to be just mindful that can be an issue. I didn't even tell you the purchase price yet. Total purchase price, or the purchase price is, I think, let's see, 325. Um, this is 70% LTV is what they said. Let's just double check that. 227 divided by 325. Yeah, six. Okay, so roughly, right? And I think these are rounded numbers, but yeah, 70% LTV, just about. To be able to get those types of returns with that sort of LTV is pretty nice. It is interest only, right? So you have no pay down. That's something that they've done a lot, and they discussed it in one of the webinars. It's something that they really thought through. It's not just, I just want to have the highest IRR, or I mean the highest yield. They're really trying to avoid lazy equity, and I think it makes a lot of sense what they're doing. Obviously they have their platform fees, their reserves and closing costs. One of the things they mentioned on the call today, and um, I remember they said it once before, but I don't know that I've ever said it when I've done a review, is they're usually trying to reserve enough that if they don't have any revenue the first year, they'd still be able to cover their expenses. And so that's a very conservative level of reserves to be able to raise that much and still put out a good return. Like I said, I mean, the more I dig into what they're doing, the more I just really like their deals. But let's look at this market, right? We're in Douglasville, Georgia. This is in the Atlanta metro, right, which we've looked at many times. Fast growing market. There's a whole bunch I like about it. The biggest complaint I think that we've seen in this metro is there tends to be more crime in some parts than others. This is a different county than we've looked at before, so I did pull up Douglas County. Um, it's growing just like the rest of the metro, so that's fantastic. And then I looked at Douglasville specifically. It's not a huge town by any measure, population, but it's experiencing really really strong growth, just like the rest of the market, and actually maybe even stronger than the metro as a whole. Excuse me, on a percentage basis. So lot to like about that. Obviously, if I were gonna invest a whole bunch of money in this, I'd want to spend a lot of time really trying to understand this market, where I'm, trying to pick up quite a few of these properties. I am, I just want to make sure it's clear. I do spend more time on these than what I do on these videos. I just try to come back and give you the highlights, the things that I think are, most noteworthy. But I do hope that when you're looking at these and thinking about buying them, that you're doing a little bit more than this when it comes to due diligence. Obviously, you always want to look at, oh, this is one of the things I think is interesting. You always want to look at the operating agreement. On the call, again, they talked about what blockchain they're on, and they mentioned this is on the last page of their operating agreements. And it's how it's the link to, where the token is. And so this is it, right? And they had actually mentioned this. This means absolutely nothing to me. ERC 1155 token standard. I have heard it, but I mean, you guys know I'm not a crypto guy, but I thought I would just point this out for anybody that this does actually matter for. It is part of how they manage, ownership back office, and they talked a little bit about that if you didn't watch the webinar. But I think that it's just interesting um, to some people. But this isn't, this is obviously not the part of this that you're going to get much good info from me about, or insight at least. There wasn't really anything too interesting in the purchase and sale agreement. One thing that I didn't notice that I've seen them do before is ask for the rents in this, a proration of the rents. I wonder if I just missed that. I'm gonna go back up to where I normally see them do it and see. It does seem like it's maybe not the same exact contract they were using before. Maybe it is, and I'm just not used to the Georgia one as much. Let's see, where did we go here? Yeah, right here. Their due diligence period, their appraisal contingency, financing contingency, can switch to an LLC. Yeah, see, usually they've put it in this section here, so I don't know if there's somewhere else that they've included it or they're just not getting prorated rents. I think it's always nice when they do that, but I don't think it's like, one way or the other. I don't think it's the end of the world. Um, but I didn't see it in there. So if you've taken a look at this and you saw it and I just missed it, let me know. I think that's interesting. One of the things I wanted to say, I really appreciate the people in the Discord that are spending some time pointing some stuff out on this. When we get to the map on here, I wanted to share something that somebody pointed out in the Discord today that I probably would have missed, and so it's helpful. This is just the housing market in Douglasville. It's had this. We've seen this trend line probably 50 times now throughout my videos, right? Like we just see this sort of, there was a peak and then it sort of went down, and maybe we're even going down a little bit more right now. Um, it's obviously not the price trend line that you want to see, but especially in markets where you have the potential for a lot of new construction is where we've seen this the most. Again, I don't know if that's what's going on here. It is a median sale price, and so when you have a market that's a lot of the smaller homes are selling, or a lot of the cheaper homes are selling faster than the bigger ones, you will get this lowering median, even though you won't necessarily have a lowering price per square foot. So I always like to look at this, but I don't read into it too much. I'm not terribly worried about it, although there is, the year one change in the median market value was, down 3.5%. Um, I really don't believe that that means any given house would be 3.5% less valuable than it was last year. Almost every time when I've dug into a specific market, it's been that there have just been more of the smaller, cheaper homes sold. But again, I don't know that for a fact that's what's happening here. It's just when I've looked at some of these markets that have this very similar trend, that seems to be what it is. Um, and even if it is, unless there's, with the hold period that we're planning on, I'm really not that worried about it when we look at what they have, because we can see, they're only, let's see, they're projecting a 3% appreciation, average annual growth, and over a 10-year hold period. Even if we have a couple negative years in the beginning, or one or two, I still believe that that's a relatively conservative look. And you can always play around with these, right? You can change their bear and bull case, but you can also change this assumption. Where do we change it? Right here, right? Growth rate. This is the rental income. Yeah, you can also change it here, right? But I'm pretty sure. Yeah, you could put whatever you want in there, and then it would get ridiculous if you do that, right? Oh, what did I screwed something up because purchase price growth rate per year. I wonder why that went up. Why that? Let's see. Let me just refresh this page and get rid of that. I wonder if I changed something else and I didn't notice. I'm just surprised that those yields moved down, and I'm not sure what I did to do that. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I changed the expense growth. Anyway, this is a lot of fun to play around with this. I'm obviously not going to do that while I'm recording, but yeah, I'm really not worried worried by this, especially because where so much of the return is coming from the yield. If you have to hold this property for a longer cycle, I'm perfectly happy doing that. And I think that average yield, it continues to grow. And so at a certain point in time, you almost don't need to sell this property to be happy with your return in it. At least me, right? As far as like, from a risk adjusted basis, as we get further down the road, if we're continuing to spit out cash the way that they're projecting, I'd be very happy about it. Speaking of which, I wanted to just point out, I still do hate that they always use this average yield. I'd love it if this was just year one yield. I think that that's just a very normal way to look at a deal. What's your cash on cash return year one? What's your annual IRR? Like those two things. I don't know why we stick this average yield in here, because they have a year one yield that they should be really proud of, right? Like I shouldn't have to come down here and find out that their year one levered cash on cash is 11.3, right? Like stick that up on top. I'm super excited about that. Um, I don't know. It's one of the few things they do that I don't like, right? It's something I think that very few serious investors look at because it doesn't, it gets really skewed as your hold period gets longer, right? So anyway, and I think it's less reliable the longer your hold period as well. I did mention, crime is one of the things that we've run into more in Atlanta than other places, or at least than some of the other markets. But this is the spot crime map for this property, and I mean, there's just nothing nearby. Again, you want to look at for other sources if it's something you're really concerned about, because sometimes, maybe not everything is reported in a way that spot crime picks it up. It doesn't mean that it's 100% safe just because you don't see stuff, but it does always make me feel a lot better when I find a map like this where I'm seeing like really close to nothing nearby, right? Checked the flood map. It looked perfectly fine to me. One of the things that I thought, I actually had never had a property right on this line, and I had to look what it was, and it's just the jurisdiction boundary because this is presumably a state highway. Um, that is not owned by Douglasville. That's what I'm thinking is happening here. But it was funny because I've never noticed it on the flood map before, but it's just because it happens to be right there. So we clear that. Looked at the hazards map from FEMA. Because it is a different county, it is actually a little bit even lower. Um, the crime rate, and I'm using the expected annual loss. If you haven't looked at this with me before, you got to keep in mind that lower density usually leads to a lower risk because what they're looking at is your actual expected loss, right? And so if there's less density, there's less to lose. And so I always like to actually scroll through the actual um, percents of different hazards occurring, and the risks of that. And so tornado is the highest one out of everything that they have on there, but it's definitely not the highest we've seen as far as a tornado score. So I don't know. I feel pretty good about this. Uh, let's see. I was looking on Padsplit to see, Atlanta's where Padsplit started, and so they have a really long history there. It doesn't seem like they've got a ton that have made their way out into this suburb, right? I mean, you can see some. And I think this one, it's a little bit off, right? Our property's right here, and this is showing up here, but this is a fully booked home. It's the closest one I could find, from 185 to 273 weekly. That seems really in line with what I'd expect. So let's see. Let's just say 200 times 7 times 52. 72,800 total annual, gross potential. And let's look at this tab. Um, and yeah, I mean, they're using, obviously what I just did was your total gross potential, not taking into account any sort of vacancy. And so I just like to look at that number, see how it, just to sort of have a very rough idea of like, does this rental income, does it check out in general for me, right? When they already have, they're stating, hey, we have actual in place incomes. Where do they say that here? Um, yeah. 100% occupied with actuals in line with year one underwriting. And what they said on the call is the actuals are actually a little bit better than their year one underwriting. They're just, like I said, I mean, they try to be conservative, and I really appreciate that. So, I'm just trying to do some checks with third party sources when they're available. But, over time, I think that I haven't caught anything where they're not doing what they're saying they're doing yet. And so as I invest more and more with them, I think that I'll be, um, more inclined to just take their word for it at a certain point. I'll always want to check certain things, especially at least at the very minimum spot checking. One thing that was super concerning to me, they launched this property as we go live, and they have, oh, is it not on this one? Is it on this one? Yeah, they have the little ticker that shows how much is raised, and it's like this number is going up as the video is happening. So people are clearly spending no time doing due diligence. They're just, hey, I like that property. Let me invest. I saw it 2 minutes ago, and I like that top line number. And I think that's really scary. Like, I think there needs to be people like us who are being prudent and diligent and asking the questions. Or it will be another situation. The risk is having another situation like the early properties on Lofty or like Landa, where they were talking about that on the call today too. And Landa's in the news for having a bunch of foreclosures happening and whatnot. And I think that almost all the sites I've seen, there's been tons of people that just jump in, only look at the site itself, don't do any third party verification, and then just invest. And I think the risk is much lower with these guys because they are real estate guys. But if there's no checks and balances, and at a certain point they just, they make more money by putting out more properties. Um, at a certain point, it's good to have some third parties like us that are spending time really digging into every single deal, giving it some scrutiny. Um, I think, and that's really why, I'm trying to build the community through the Discord and everything. It's because I think that the more of us that are doing that and asking for more transparency and that sort of thing are, it's only going to be better for all of us as a whole. So, guys, if I don't want to tell you what to do, but if you're just jumping in and hitting the buy button without doing any sort of research up front, that's a little scary. Maybe somebody got the link early, did their due diligence, and then did it during that call. I don't know, but I don't know. That kind of investing just worries me because that's like more like meme coin buying or it's not. And I guess too, maybe some of those people are further along in their process with Mogul, and they just have built more trust, like I was just saying. In any case, that's all I'm going to say about that. Um, let's see. I looked at some third-party websites. This was listed on the market. This wasn't an off-market deal like a lot of them. Um, let's see. It's in line with the average home price in the area. Let me see. I think that it wasn't on that one. Sometimes when they're listed for sale, where the estimates go changes. But so this one is listed for 330. Its estimate 327. Under contract 325. So it is a situation where it looks like they negotiated a little discount. Um, and it's only been on the market 28 days. A ton of views and saves. I mean, this is in my market right now, if we had that many views and saves on online listing, I'd be super excited about it if it was one of mine. So, it was a popular property. My guess is a lot of the people that saw it did not want to keep it as a pad split, and so that was a negative once they actually like dug into the deal. But so obviously some demand there. This is one of the best, priced properties that we're buying or that they've put out in a while. A lot of them, if you've watched my other videos, I've been a little critical about, I don't really understand how they're getting to that value. This one seems really clear, right? Like it seems, from the third party spots that I've looked at, um, it seems like that value makes a lot of sense. The only other thing that I really looked at from this one was, oh, this is about an 8 minute walk. This is a bus stop view or a picture of the bus stop. It looks like there is a bus stop, even though, usually when I'm looking on the street view, I'm looking for the little signs that shows that they're one, and Google isn't picking that up. So at first, If you look around, you might think, oh no, there's no bus stops here. And that's really important with pad splits, right? Like, even though this one is further from downtown or further from Atlanta, I still expect most people, or there'll be some portion of people that rent by the room that won't own a car. And so having a nearby bus stop is important. And so this is what I was mentioning. One of the people uh, pointed this out to me in the Discord, and I really appreciate that, right? Because um, one, I probably would have spent a little time looking around, and if I didn't see it, just said, "Oh, that worries me," right? Whereas we don't have any bus stop, and it's where what are they going to do? There is a decent, the parking situation, which is one of the things I'm always looking for, it looks very good, right? I mean, you have a long driveway, you have two-car garage, and then, you also have plenty of land if you need to expand that, like if over time your tenant base shifts a little and more of them are demanding parking spots. Um, but which tends not to really be the case, at least most of the time with pad splits. A lot of times, there'll be a certain portion of them that will have cars, but a lot of them won't as well. It is a nice big lot, so there's definitely room if you needed to expand the parking. Um, but yeah, I was really glad someone pointed that out because it is just an 8-minute walk. I mean, it's longer than we've seen from some of the other ones. Oh, and actually, I think it's really right here is where we're trying to get to. No, so it might even be a little bit shorter. I'm just making it longer by dragging that around. Um, yeah, so I don't know. Usually I like to have something negative to tell you about the property. I guess, it says built in 1994, which seems surprising to me from the look of it, but I think it's possible. Actually, let's see if we can. I just paused it real quick so I could look this property up in the public records. It does look like it's actually a 1994 build based on that as well. I think it was just built to look older because, I was going to say, oh, maybe, I don't love that it's an older property. Obviously, it has had a pretty recent renovation based on the looks of the pictures. Um, Yeah, I really wish I had like some good complaint. That's, one of the reasons that I want to, do these videos is I can always show you something that okay, this is something that you should look for that we don't know about. But sometimes that's just how it is, Sometimes you're going to look at a property and uh, it really, there's no giant red flags. And so it's possible that I'm missing them. Please do if you see things about this that you think, oh, that's going to be a problem. I can't believe Joe missed it. Or obviously he missed it because he misses all kinds of stuff. Put that comment in the comment on the video or jump in the Discord and let's talk about it. um, Obviously, I guess this is now I'm really going to nitpick because I want to tell you something. Having such a big flight of stairs in the front of your home, it is going to limit to some extent the people that want to live there, right? You're not going to get old guys like me who don't want to walk up the steps every day to get home. There's something. I actually have seen that with homes that we've rented before. I really think though the rent by the room, your most of your demographic is going to be younger people. But there's some chance that you'll have somebody with a handicap or something that this is going to be a deterrent for. So there you go. There's a good reason to just don't buy this property because of that. I mean, honestly, this is one that I'll be buying a piece of. I don't have any great, reservations. You do have some, wearing and cracking paint and whatnot. Um, and we don't have the home inspection. It's not in the links yet. One of the things, because they just have been, that they've just stated that they're really addressing any of the must fix items, and we don't really have any visibility on that, like what they do before it gets set ready to go. That is one thing I'd like to see changed a little bit, is it just even more detail about that. um, Whenever I do ask them about different stuff, there was one thing that came up on the call that I should have mentioned. I did ask specifically, hey, how come, you don't want to share the appraisals with us before you buy? And they said they had already had situations where, normally when I get an appraisal when I'm buying, I don't share that information with the seller, especially if it like appraises higher or whatnot. And so they said they've already had a situation where a seller's agent has logged into their site to just see what they're presenting, and so they just want to keep those to themselves until after the purchase. Um, Obviously, I don't love it because I want to be able to do that due diligence and actually dig into the appraisal. But at the same time, I think it's a a reasonable business case for wanting to not share that. And they did reiterate that, they always have a appraisal contingency and will never move forward if it hasn't appraised. Um, which is, gives us some protection, but I still always want to look at the document. So that was one thing. I understand why they're doing it. I don't love the solution, but I also don't have a good suggestion for them, right? Like where, uh, where like users that have been investing for a while or something get access to them or something. I think there's no good way. Like there's nothing that I've come up with that I think really works in that situation. And then the other thing I had asked about is if they're going to start sharing the, you know, on the portfolio tab of the properties that we already own, if they're going to start sharing their reserve amounts. And they mentioned that that is part of their plan. What they actually want to do is store it, store reserves, as a stable coin in the blockchain. Again, sort of, to me, that's not so important, but I think to some people will care about that. Um, but in the meantime, they said they might somewhere on our portfolio page, create an indication of what that number is. And like I mentioned, they are at the point in time of purchase, collecting a very healthy um, reserve, but I still would like to see what it is on an ongoing basis. 5 years down the road, I own a property and it has, there's a big difference if it has a 10K reserve or if it has a 50K reserve. It'll make a difference in what I'm looking at in my portfolio. So, but I asked them that and they said, yeah, this is something we're working on. So, I think in general they are really geared towards providing as much transparency as they can. Um, but in a situation where they think it's actually going to hurt them, as far as, hurt all of us investing in their product, they're trying to avoid that. And I think that that makes perfect sense. So I don't know. I'd like to be able to see the appraisals though. Like you can tell it bothers me, but, like I said, I mean, at the same time, I'm gonna just do my own analysis anyway. And if they on some of the ones that they have a really high purchase price, I don't even know if I looked at the appraisal if it's going to convince me anyway, right? Like, I mean, sometimes I think, I don't know, but sometimes I think that they'll have some data that I ignored or missed or passed over, which is why I had asked for that a few times. But this is not one, right? Like it doesn't seem like there's a valuation problem. It's like, it's really, you know, maybe you could complain about it being right on the highway. I think that if it were a long-term rental where you thought that, your typical renter was going to be, um, somebody, with somebody with kids that they were wanted to play in the yard and didn't want to be near, like sometimes it's a deterrent. Maybe it affects your resale, but it is, and also I don't know how main of a road that is. I mean, we can look both ways and there's not even a ton of traffic. So it's not like this is like, a real big highway or something either. So I don't know. And train tracks though, so I didn't look up the noise for the neighborhood. Let's do that. Maybe we can find something to complain about. It's really what I want. Um, I don't ever want to be perfectly happy with something. So let's look at the realtor.com noise level for this. Oh, I already had it in there. I didn't have to copy and paste it again. Let's see. And we just went over this the other day. You can see this. I hate the way their tabs don't always drop down. So we have to scroll. Neighborhood. Oh, and they have it different here. See this, it seems like, yeah, here we go. We've just got this lifestyle tab. Quiet. Uh, Many sources. Okay, but it's a two. So this score, it's a quiet score, right? So you want it to be higher. The higher it is, the quieter it is. But this says many sources of noise nearby too. Okay, so that is something to really think about, right? So maybe it's the road, maybe it's the train tracks. Um, is there anything else that we think that could be from? I don't know, because that's a real high score or a real low score for quietness. I'm glad we dug a little deeper and maybe found something. Now, you do have a decent setback there. Um, that's interesting. That's the only thing. That's the only thing I've come up with. It's definitely not going to change my mind. This is one a lot of them I've been on the fence about. Am I going to buy a piece of it? I'm definitely going to buy a piece of this one. Probably won't be until tomorrow or the next day, although it does look like it might sell out relatively quickly. Uh, if you come up with other reasons, please share them with me. Tell me why I shouldn't buy this one, right? Like what am I missing? Um, I think the noise is one that should have jumped out right away. But I when I jumped in the map today, I went straight to looking for the bus because I had had that discussion. Um, let's see, what else could we pick up? I don't think a whole lot. But you never know, and that's why, if you're going to put a lot of money in this or, you want to really dig into everything that you can think of. And that's something that I'm always trying to do. And like you'll see, I probably spend at least an hour or two on these before I do a video. And then almost always, if I do decide I'm going to buy, or I think I'm going to, I spend a decent amount after that too, right? Because you want to just dig into it. Um, Especially on this platform, it is one that your money is locked up in there, right? You're not getting it back until this property sells. Maybe they come out with their secondary market where you can cash out. They've said they're going to do that. We don't really have any clarity on exactly how it's going to work. They other than they did talk about they're going to set a price. So hopefully that means you're not getting some selling it for a discount. They're going to have a market maker that's going to buy it. But overall, I think that because you're going to be locked into it for a longer period of time, I want to really be sure that I'm comfortable in the investment. And that's why, like, if there's something that I think could be a longer term issue, I want to think about that too. So hopefully, I don't want to buy this and have nothing to worry about. So hopefully some of you guys can give me some things, say like, there's got to be some other stuff. But, it is, on the surface, in place income looks good. Um, this is one of the first ones where they have a couple of spots where they could add rooms, and so that it creates the potential for some upside. It's one where there's the property price seems to be like really in line with what Zillow says at least, and I think I also checked Redfin, but and Homes.com. So there was limited pad split data compared to some of the other places, but again, it sort of proved the number that I was looking for. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm letting you down that I don't have like some problem that we can, stew about before pulling the trigger on this one. But again, just because I want to buy it doesn't mean that you should. Definitely dig into all the things that we talked about. There certainly could be some other things that I'm missing that I did, that I just forgot or skipped over or, whatever it is. But anyway, until next time, I'll just keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.